My name is Elias Vance, and I have been running the Sterling Empire for the past 7 years without anyone knowing I exist. The world believes that Julian Sterling, the aging CEO, still sits at the helm of the trillion-dollar conglomerate that has shaped the global economy. They see his face on magazine covers, hear his voice in shareholder meetings, read his quotes in financial journals. But Julian Sterling has been a puppet for nearly a decade. I am the one pulling the strings. I am the missing child, the one who was abandoned by this family when I was barely 6 years old. I was the son they forgot, the heir they erased, the ghost they thought had vanished into the foster care system. But I didn't vanish. I waited. I watched. I planned. And when the time was right, I returned. Not as a long-lost son, but as a quiet employee. A junior analyst in the logistics division. A man who smiled, nodded, and never drew attention to himself. For 5 years, I climbed the corporate ladder in silence, learning every secret, every weakness, every crime that had built this empire. I studied my father's habits, my siblings' vices, my uncle's corruptions. I knew where the bodies were buried, both literally and figuratively. And then, when I had accumulated enough power and enough evidence, I began to take control. One by one, I replaced the board members with my own people. I manipulated the stock prices. I orchestrated the scandals that would destroy my enemies. I became the shadow CEO, the invisible hand that guided the empire toward its inevitable destruction. But the destruction was never the point. The point was revenge. Revenge for the childhood I was denied. Revenge for the family that had abandoned me. Revenge for the life that had been stolen from me. And I was going to make every single one of them pay. My siblings had no idea I existed. They had been raised in luxury, groomed to inherit the empire, protected from the harsh realities of the world. Alexander, the eldest, was a corporate shark who had been running the company for years. Eleanor, the middle child, was a philanthropist whose charities were fronts for money laundering. Julian, the youngest, was a hedonist who had never worked a day in his life. And Marcus, the golden child, was the one who had been chosen to inherit everything. I hated them all, not because they were successful, because they had never suffered. They had never known what it was like to be hungry, to be cold, to be invisible. They had never known what it was like to be abandoned by the very people who were supposed to protect you. I had spent my entire life in the shadows, watching them from a distance, waiting for the moment when I could strike. And that moment had finally arrived. I had spent years building my network, cultivating my allies, and positioning myself to take control. The empire was mine, not through inheritance, through cunning, through patience, through the relentless pursuit of justice. The first phase of my revenge was simple. I exposed my siblings' crimes to the world. Alexander's embezzlement, Eleanor's money laundering, Julian's drug addiction, Marcus's corruption. The scandals destroyed their reputations, their marriages, their futures. They were arrested, disgraced, and stripped of everything they had ever taken for granted. I watched from the shadows, a smile playing on my lips. They had no idea who had done this to them. They had no idea that the missing child they had forgotten had become the architect of their destruction. It was the most satisfying moment of my life. But the revenge was not complete. Not yet. My father, Julian Sterling, was still alive. He was old now, frail, a shell of the man who had once terrorized the business world. He sat in his penthouse, surrounded by the trappings of wealth that had long since lost their meaning. He had no idea that the empire he had built was crumbling around him. He had no idea that the son he had abandoned was the one pulling the strings. I visited him for the first time in decades. He didn't recognize me. He looked at me with the vacant eyes of a man who had lost touch with reality. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice barely a whisper. I leaned closer, my face inches from his. "I'm your son, Father, the one you threw away, the one you forgot, and I've come to collect what's mine." His eyes widened with recognition and then with fear. He tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come. I smiled. "Don't worry, Father. I'm not going to kill you. That would be too easy. I'm going to let you live. I'm going to let you watch as I destroy everything you built. I'm going to let you die knowing that your legacy is in the hands of the son you abandoned." I walked away, leaving him in the silence of his penthouse. The revenge was not about killing. It was about letting him suffer, and he would suffer for the rest of his life. The second phase of my revenge was more personal. I had been working in the company's logistics division for years, and during that time I had discovered something that changed everything. My father had not just abandoned me, he had orchestrated my disappearance. He had paid off the foster care system, the social workers, the police. He had erased me from existence because I was a threat to his empire. I was not just a forgotten child. I was a witness to the crimes that had built the sterling legacy. I had seen things that no child should ever see. I had heard conversations that were never meant to be heard. And my father had tried to silence me by making me disappear. But he had failed. I had survived, and I had returned to expose the truth. I gathered the evidence, the testimonies, the documents, the photographs. I built a case that would destroy the Sterling family forever. And then, on the night of the annual shareholder meeting, I released it all. The world was shocked. The empire crumbled. My father was arrested. My siblings were indicted. The family that had once been the most powerful in the world was reduced to nothing. I watched the news coverage with a cold, detached satisfaction. The missing child had finally been found, and he had brought the empire down with him. The aftermath was brutal. The Sterlings were ruined, disgraced, and scattered to the winds. The empire that had been built on a foundation of blood and lies was gone. But I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no joy, only a hollow emptiness that I couldn't fill. I had spent my entire life planning this revenge, and now that it was complete, I didn't know what to do with myself. I had no family, no friends, no connections to the world I had destroyed. I was alone. The silence was deafening. I returned to the office of the CEO, the office that I had controlled from the shadows. I sat in the leather chair, surrounded by the trappings of power that had once belonged to my father, and I wept. I wept for the child I had been, the life I had lost, the family that had betrayed me. I wept for the emptiness that consumed me. The revenge was complete, but the healing had not yet begun. I spent the next year trying to rebuild my life. I sold the remaining assets of the empire and donated the proceeds to charity. I went to therapy. I started writing. I began to understand the depth of the trauma I had carried for so long. I realized that the revenge had been a way to protect myself, a way to avoid the pain of the abandonment. But the pain was still there. It would always be there. The only way to move forward was to accept it, to embrace it, to let it become a part of who I was. I wrote a memoir about my experiences. It became a bestseller, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. I traveled the world, speaking to audiences about the importance of forgiveness, the power of healing, the need to break the cycle of revenge. I became an advocate for abandoned children, a voice for those who had been silenced. And in doing so, I found a purpose that transcended the pain of my past. The final twist came when I received a letter from my mother. My mother, the woman who had abandoned me. I had never known her, never even seen a photograph. But she had been alive all along, watching me from a distance, waiting for the moment when she could reach out to me. The letter was brief, filled with apologies, with explanations, with a love that had been buried for decades. She had been forced to abandon me. My father had threatened to kill her, to kill me, to destroy everyone she loved. She had run away to protect me, and she had spent the rest of her life living with the guilt. I read the letter with tears streaming down my face. I didn't know whether to be angry or relieved, but I knew one thing. I needed to meet her. I needed to hear her voice. I needed to understand why she had done what she did. I tracked her down to a small town in the Midwest. She was old now, her face lined with a lifetime of regret. When I saw her, I felt a surge of emotion that I couldn't control. I was angry, I was hurt, I was confused, but I was also hopeful. Hopeful that we could heal. Hopeful that we could rebuild. Hopeful that we could finally be a family. We spent weeks together, talking, crying, and laughing. She told me about her life, her fears, her regrets. She told me about the love she had felt for me, the love that had never died. And I told her about my life, my pain, my revenge. She was horrified by what I had done, but she understood. She understood the anger, the resentment, the desperate need for justice. She had felt it too. "I never stopped loving you," she said. "I never stopped hoping, and I never stopped believing that one day we would find each other." I held her hand, and for the first time in my life, I felt a sense of belonging. I felt like I had finally found a place where I belonged. The revenge I had taken was not against my father or my siblings. It was against the silence that had consumed my life. It was against the abandonment that had defined my childhood. And in breaking that silence, I had found my voice, a voice that would never be silenced again. I forgave my mother, not because she deserved it, because I deserved peace. I forgave my father, not because he deserved it, because I deserved to let go of the anger that had consumed me. I forgave my siblings, not because they deserved it, because I deserved to move on. The sterling empire was gone. The fortune was gone. The family was scattered. But I had found something far more valuable, a family of my own. I married a woman who understood me, who accepted me, who loved me for who I was. We had children, 2 beautiful children who would never know the pain of abandonment. I gave them the love and support that I had never received. I broke the cycle. I built something new, something that was entirely mine. The story of Elias Vance became a legend, a cautionary tale about the cost of revenge and the power of redemption. But for me, it was something simpler, a beginning I had never thought I deserved, and a future I would build with my own hands, one truth at a time. The empire was gone, the fortune was gone, the family was gone, but I was still here. And that, in the end, was the most powerful revenge of all. The final chapter of my life was not about destruction, it was about creation. I built a foundation that helped abandoned children find their way home. I wrote books that inspired others to break the cycle of revenge. I spoke to audiences around the world, sharing my story, my pain, my redemption. The missing child who had run the empire from the shadows had become a force for good, a force of hope, a force for change. And in doing so, I had finally found the peace that had eluded me for so long. The revenge was complete, not because I had destroyed my enemies, because I had saved myself. And in saving myself, I had become the hero of my own story. The missing child was no longer missing. He had found his way home. And home, he had finally learned, was not a place. It was a feeling of belonging, a feeling of love, a feeling of peace. And that, in the end, was the only inheritance that truly mattered.